Morning, Zena. Good to see you.
Good morning. Well, good afternoon.
We've got a really special call today, and I'm so excited to do our first ever micro chat. And these are conversations that I am having with athletes who have been on the team for more than 1,000 days and have accomplished a really big dream goal in that time. And I'm just super excited to start this off with Zena, because earlier this year, she accomplished an amazing goal, 100 miler at the Sierras. Let me see if I can get this right. Sierras del Bandoleros. And this Cien Millas, you're going to get my Argentinian accent with these Spanish pronunciations, Zena. But this was, I want you to go into this actually, but I'm going to preface this with, for those of you guys who don't know about Spanish ultra running, this race, I kind of likened it to the hard rock of like the south of Spain, and super steep, super technical. And we trained for, Zena accomplished this goal on her 1,201st day of training with microCHAT. And that is an incredible investment in time, in herself, a big commitment to herself and the things that she enjoys to do, trail running, ultra running. And I really wanted to have this conversation with Zena because I know in our conversations together, so many important insights have come through the training process, through, a big 32-hour effort to complete this goal. And I really want to share those things with the entire community, because there is a wealth of knowledge within this team that if we give you guys the platform, it can really impact the entire group, all of us. So, all right, that's going to be my little intro. Zena, let's get into it. Let's get into our conversation here. Most people are maybe familiar with you through the Rad Weekend updates and some of our chats, here in our community calls. You tend to be a participant. But just tell us about yourself a little bit, like where are you from, where you live, how long have you been running, kind of the 101.
101. So I live in the south of Spain. I've lived here for 16 years, but I'm a British national. So I moved to be closer to family and to give my kids a different way of life. Yeah, I love it here. It's amazing. I live on the side of a mountain. Trying to find somewhere flat to run is actually quite interesting. I started running. I had to actually look this up because I couldn't remember, because I came to running later on in life, and I started running, and it turns out it was 2015. And my kids were doing athletics in the village, and the athletics coach basically said, come on parents, why don't you join in? So I started running with the kids and training with kids, and it just went on from there. Yeah.
I mean, that's so cool. And I think everybody kind of has like a different entry point into trail running, and just hearing that yours came from, wanting to run with your kids, and amazing. I think a lot of parents actually can kind of resonate with that, because they've got kids as well who are doing cross country or track, and then there's kind of like parallel passions, but just different ages, or different interests within the sport, but overlap to enjoy some of these things together. How long did it take you to, like, I don't know, move onto the trails from maybe running with the kids?
The kids were running, and Paco is a mountain goat, so it wouldn't be unusual for us actually to go into parts of the Sierra to train together. my husband at the same time had taken up running the year before, and he'd done a marathon in Malaga, and was like, what next? We'd already hit the trails. So it was a case of, well, why not spend some time together? So it happened pretty darn quick. And then my first race was in 2016 in the mountains above Marbella, which is called Sierra Blanca. It was 13 kilometers with 800 meters of climb. So let me translate that. I think that was 8 miles with 2,650 feet as my first race. And that was it. I was hooked.
The steeper, the better.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about where you live and you're like, oh, it's kind of hard to find areas that are flat, you know, for running, for doing strides, for doing some flatter workouts. I mean, she's not over embellishing this at all. I think it was like our first or second email exchange after you signed on with us.
Yeah.
You kind of sent me like all your normal routes that you run. And I was like, oh, all right. And you're like, can you find anything in here that's flat? And I was like, And it took us a little time to, find your piste, where you can do your strides and stuff like that. And you've done a really good job of honing in on those like little strips of level ground to get the important work in, and it's really paid off. But I think it's just super funny and interesting how some athletes are really terrain limited where they are. They live in like a major city or something, and they can't get into the mountains to train for a race like the one we're talking about today. And for you, it's the opposite. You can't get away from the mountains. They're right there.
It's the way that the geography is. Where I live is known for the beaches, and nobody realizes there's actually mountains. But if you look up, all along this coastline are different mountain ranges. So yeah, if you go down to the coast, there's flat. But for me to go down to the coast is a 30-minute drive. Well, in the morning, that's sometimes not feasible. So yeah, it's tricky. But I get to run on the mountain every single day. That I am very lucky.
Yeah, amazing. And I guess just for a little more like locational context, you know, in the south of Spain where you're kind of directly across from North Africa. Is that right?
Yeah. So on a good day from my house, we can actually see Africa. We can see the Atlas Mountains. And the mountain ranges would have been joined at some point because it's a tectonic plate and they split. Something that's on my bucket list is actually to go over, because it would be amazing to stand on those mountains and see my mountain from the other side of the sea. That's something I dream of doing.
Oh man, that would be super cool. I love that. And I just, you know, I get the benefit, the window seat into all of Zena's running for, you know, the last years. And every time she goes on a run or sends me a photo, I'm like, man, this is a place that I've got to get out and visit. It looks beautiful. The trails look really fun, but also challenging and rugged. And it just seems like an inspiring place as a runner, as a trail runner to live, right? Like there's an adventure right outside your doorstep every day for you. And I think just thinking about, you know, the context of this bigger adventure, the 100-miler that you completed earlier this year, you know, I can see why you've grown from, hold on one second. That was a toilet flushing for sure. I can see why I can see the direction you've gone with your running and why you've taken it from, you know, starting off with the kids to getting on the trails to eventually running 100-miler, you know, 5 years later, 6 years later, something like, or maybe more. Maybe it was, you said 2016, so 8 years.
2015 to 8 years, yeah. Oh no, because there was 100 miles in Hanau. That would have been at the 6-year mark, I think. But it wasn't, none of it was rushed. I just spent a year doing 10Ks because I didn't have the confidence to go any longer. Then I did the 20 and 30Ks. Then I did a 50K. And then I signed up for another 50K, and a friend of mine was running 130K in Hanau and he's a dentist, and he'd run out. We run in teams. We don't have paces here, so some races you can have teams, and it was a team of 3, and he'd lost one of their members. And he was actually doing dental work at the time on me, and managed to convince me when I couldn't answer back that I was going to swap my race from 50 to 130. And that's how I ended up starting doing the much longer stuff.
Oh, that's so cool. And that's kind of like a great way to like preface this discussion on the specifics around your race. Sierras del Bandoleros, I think I got it. Bandoleros. Your race names always are troubling to me. Why did you choose this race? I remember, reading through your training log during that time in the, 16 weeks before, and this race had a lot of meaning to you, and it was really important to you from a number of different aspects. Yeah, let's just talk about that a little bit. Like, what was the why there?
The biggest, our races aren't business models, they're all volunteer basis, so they're actually quite cheap to run. So each race has a slightly different flavor. When it comes to Sierra de Bandoleros, it's run by Club Triton, and they're a club that are formerly senderismo, which is hiking, and keeping open the old roads, the old ways, the old paths, and stopping farmers, fencing them off and stopping access. So that's where they're coming from, and this is where this race grew from, really. It's a huge race. 3 races, marathon, 50 miler, 100 miler, 1,400 runners in total. It brings in the community about 400,000 euros, which is desperately needed. These are tiny villages, and they're depopulating. The people, the young people, they're moving out into the cities for the jobs. The rural way of life is disappearing. So this cash injection into the area is absolutely huge. It's also a local race, and I like to race local because I like to explore, and I like to explore what's on my doorstep. So it ties in with all of that. But I think my biggest why was after Hanau, I wasn't sure whether 100 miles was actually too far for my body, I'll be honest, because if I was out there for 40 hours, I was injured. Took, as you know, forever to get over the injury, but also I knocked my aerobic system out. So it took ages for that to come back online. And it's like, is that cost worth it? So going into this race, I didn't actually plan anything afterwards in case the recovery was rough, because I didn't want to do what I did last time, which is end up with a whole load of did not starts. So gave myself the reason to 100% put myself into it and not put myself into a position where I was going to feel awful afterwards if the recovery was hideous. Luckily it wasn't. 6 weeks and I'm back online. I was back to running properly, but it was in the back of my mind that this could actually be too much. I was okay with that. We've got some amazing 50 milers and 100k races, and to be honest, some of them are nuts, particularly in the Pyrenees. They are crazy races. I wouldn't even attempt them. They're closer to mountaineering than trail running, I'll be honest. But you don't get that in the 100 miles. They tend to be more of a combination, like this one is, of very technical terrain, but there will be runnable sections as well. So you can keep moving, and I've got half a chance of finishing the thing.
Yeah, and I just want to back it up here just for a quick second for everybody who's listening. You kind of came into this race off of a setback. You had Hanal, and you didn't, ultimately finish the race, and then I think it was a knee issue or an ITV thing, if I can remember.
Well, no, when I came to Hanau, it was a long climb up to Gausen, and I turned white as a sheet. And I struggled up to it, and I came up to the village there completely white, and my husband was crewing me that time. We went into the aid station and we waited 45 minutes, and I just came round, but it also started hurting early on. So I could have continued, but all I was going to do was delay the inevitable and possibly cause more damage. So we decided that it was better to stop there, and go, right, okay, today is not my day. Let's just move on from it, then see how far I could get while destroying my body more and more and more with these aches and pains that I already had. And it turns out that I had actually damaged the tendon again that I damaged in the 100 miles. So it was a damn good job I stopped, because it could have been a lot rougher.
That's right. That's right. And I think that, you know, obviously showing a lot of wisdom there and being able to, you know, take that step back and respond to how you were feeling, it's really critical in those moments to kind of try to put things aside and say, hey, you know, there's going to be other races. And I think in doing that, you know, and the recovery was still challenging, and I don't want to trivialize that at all, because it did take you quite a while to get back. And then there was, you know, there were a lot of questions, and then our approach to training for Sierras del Bandoleros was a little
Just call it Bandoleros.
Bandoleros. Yeah, as soon as I have to start putting in the Sierras del Bandoleros, I'm just like, oh, what am I saying? Our approach was different for this race than previous races, and we can talk a little bit about that later. But just give everybody the lowdown on like the specifics of the terrain and kind of like the race profile. I prefaced this earlier as like, for us folks in North America, this is kind of like a hard rock, really steep, technical, a lot of climbing.
Yeah, I'm very much of the opinion that each route has its own challenges, and you can't compare one race against another because they are incredibly different. With this one, it starts on fire track, and then it hits incredibly technical terrain. There is one downhill where you turn a corner and you feel as if you're just perched on the edge looking down onto this village that is tiny, tiny, tiny. And I have looked up from this village, it's called Villa, to try and find the trail to see if I can see where it goes. I cannot find it. I cannot work out how you get to the top, to the bottom. Let me just close the door while my dog's going crazy.
So it's steep.
It's steep. There's some good climbs, but I like a good climb. The problem always comes with the technical downhills. That's what always slows me down. That's my Achilles heel. But it's a challenge, and I love it.
So I kind of hinted at this. What was our training like leading up to the event, and had we done anything different in terms of volume or workouts to, I don't know, approach this one?
So the big difference is DJ wrote to me and said, we're going lower volume. And I can remember looking at the log, and I sat there wrestling. I'm going, I ain't doing lower volume. This is not right. And I think I stormed around the house, complained to my husband, came back and wrote, okay. But actually it suits me so well. The quality of training I could do on the lower volume was far higher. Yes, I can do the higher volume. I can do the big days. But actually the lower volume worked incredibly well for me. We also last year started putting in flat workouts, which I hate to say have really made a big difference in my running, and my flat pace has increased. I mean, by most people's standards, it's still quite slow, but for me, I couldn't believe that I'm running these kinds of paces, and that's translated over into this race as well.
Yeah, and gosh, I remember having those conversations with you about switching it up and trying to elevate the quality of the work we were doing rather than relying so much on just getting in a bunch of volume. Because I kind of was getting the sense that we were getting to races a little more tired than we should have been, and it might have been putting you in a compromised position just slightly enough that when you're doing such a long race, it really gets exposed, and then you're not able to like access your real potential. And so it was a tough choice for me too to go lower volume. for many different reasons. I think athletes always cringe when they're like, less, ooh, gosh, I don't know if less is the best way forward. And also, when you're doing really long races, there is a level of volume that the athlete really does need to be doing in order to be successful there. And we were able to kind of find the sweet spot, which was so fun. And I'll just fast forward just a second here, because when you sent me the race pictures afterwards, and there was a photo of you running out of one of the aid stations later in the race, and I was like, yes, this is why we did all of those strides and those flatter workouts, and we didn't work as much on uphill velocity as we had in the past. And we made some slight changes, and like, wow, look at that. She is running, and she is like 20 hours into this race or something. And I'm like, yes, we've done good work here. I was so happy and so excited to see that. All right. So heading into the race, what did I love this question. Okay. Because it really gets to the heart of things, and what I'm hoping to achieve with athletes. Did the goal and the training help you live the kind of life you wanted to live?
Oh, well, yes. But I kind of made the switch towards, I love being in the mountains at the weekend. As you know, when we first started, my husband was injured. So I was doing a lot of miles on my own, obviously with the pandemic as well. But he's now back online and running. So I'm getting to spend quality time with him. And that's what we love, going out, exploring, seeing different areas. It's fantastic. But also the day-to-day running, the training, it's part of my day-to-day life. It has been literally since I started running. I never had this period where I wasn't consistent. Yeah, okay, to start off with, it was 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers. But I've always been very, very consistent. So yeah, it does help me lead the life I want to live. You do this to do that. So you do your workouts, so you can go explore. So yeah, absolutely. But I'm very lucky with the access I've got here. Each mountain range is very different and has a different flavor. So within a couple of hours drive, I can be in very different types of technical terrain. So yeah, but what else?
Well, Zena, with that in mind, when we switched to a little bit lower volume, did you question at all your, how your, I don't know, your like lifestyle or your habits or your approach would change? And if they were going to change, was that like more than just like, all right, I got to go like vent to my husband for a second? Was there like a period where you felt like, all right, I'm not actually living the way I want to live? This is different than I thought? Or were you or did you just kind of embrace it?
I just embraced it. There's no, yeah, just embraced it. It was like, okay, this is what we're doing. Let's go.
Awesome.
There was no, yeah.
Every coach's dream.
So I'm going to trust you. Why else have I got you there?
Totally. Well, thank you. And I think that really showed in just to add a little more context for people listening, it wasn't like we weren't doing long runs or big weekends and stuff. And Zena actually did do some really big weekends leading up to the race. But weekday volume was a little lower. We really picked and we were picking and choosing the right moments for those long runs and giving a little bit more time for rest and adaptation afterwards, which I think was really key. And like one of like the things that I thought you really nailed in the lead up was we got to do some kind of like fun rate, like you did a fun back-to-back race 2 weekends before. And that was like a pretty great boot camp where you did, nearly 5 hours of training, at the very end of the build, which is considerable stress concentration. But then the 2 weeks before that weren't that big. But then, we really kind of like we're doing the oscillating volume approach. And I think that is just huge. But something that's so important to you is the cultural aspect of all of this, the community aspect that comes with the training and the racing. And so, I think when I'm building your plan, I'm always trying to be really aware of like, where can we insert that wisely into the plan? And like looking back over the build up for this, you had some sections in your log, and this is like right before the taper, where you mentioned my face hurts from smiling so much. And when I hear that from an athlete 2 weeks before a race, I know that they're setting themselves up for success. And it wasn't that you were just mentioning this because you had like a fun weekend on the trails. It was because like you were out there running with your people, connecting with your people. And that is something that is a big part of your deep why. So I wanted to make sure we got that out there, because whenever we're trying to live the kind of life we want to live, we're trying to connect the goal to the why, right? And so inserting that even wherever you can into a big training build is really key. Would you agree that was, helpful for you in the lead up to this race?
Yeah, and our trail running community is fantastic. It's quite, reasonably small, maybe. So over the years, I've made many friends on the trails. But our races have a lot of continuity as well, because we have a European style speaker at all our races. And the guy that tends to do most of them is a guy called Cheeto. In fact, he tripped up John Alban last autumn in Tolox, which was quite funny. There's a video of him doing it. But he sees us all off, and then when we come back in again, he's there welcoming us all back in. He's an absolute fantastic guy. And I think that adds to the sense of community that we have on our trails. And then you end up running with people. We don't have pacers, so you'll end up running parts of the race with other people. So you become friends with them. You are striving for the same goal, because these races for me are a challenge. So it's, can I do the route? How well can I do this route? It's not about, can I be better than the person next to me? So you end up with this kind of camaraderie, which is lovely. And I say I've made some really, really lovely friends through this, and that's great. And it's so nice to just see them again when you're all excited about racing and you're all there, and you get to the end, and if it's a route you don't know, you might be bitching about that climb or that descent, or why the heck did you put that in there? It's a really, really good scene. I'm been really lucky with it all. It's all been very serendipity, but I've been really lucky.
That's just so awesome. And I love, again, I get the benefit of the window seat into the day-to-day of all of this. And it does, sound like like you guys have an amazing community out there, and us folks in North America should be taking some notes. And I just love what you mentioned. I think this really is important for all the other athletes to hear, is that, these races are a collaboration. You don't have pacers. And we're talking about an event that took 32 hours. This is a really, really, really long trail race. And if it's not a collaboration, if you guys aren't out there supporting each other, running together, I think you all miss out on some important opportunities, not just for bonding and supporting each other, but also for reaching the potential that you have within yourself. Because when we're collaborating with others, we can often, in those moments of working together, we coax the best parts of ourselves out from one another. That collaboration is super, super important. It's not really about me versus you. It's about how can I lift you up and help you do your best? How can you do the same for me? And I get that that is like such an integral part of the trail running culture where you are. It's so cool. So we're hinting at it again, which is awesome. Did you have a specific mindset going into this race? What were you thinking about mentally? I know in the beginning of the call you kind of mentioned, there were some unknowns, right? Like, would my old injury like flare up again, or can I go the distance? What was your mindset like? How did you approach that kind of conversation with yourself?
I had that on one side. On the other side, because my husband is now injured, I had no crew. So I ran this 100-miler alone with 2 drop bags, which was really played on my mind, because it's a long way to go when you can't call somebody up to say, I'm coming into the next aid station and can you give me this, please? So I really, really upped my game on the mental prep and on the logistics as well. But the main thing I did when I went into this race is I didn't go in with any performance related goals whatsoever. I did not write down one timing anywhere. I had lots of process orientated goals. I had a process to run. So I wasn't expecting the race to take me 32 hours. I was expecting at least 38. Just looking at what friends had done who are similar to me, to give me a rough idea, because you need to kind of know how many gels you're going to pack. So I went in with nothing. I didn't want to think about that, but it was actually really freeing, because I wasn't thinking when I got to a station, oh look, I'm up, or oh look, oh my goodness, I'm down. And while I'd covered the whole route in my training, if you're doing a race that you don't know, you can have a section that you think, well, that's going to be easy. And you actually find that there's a chain in the middle and you've got to do some down climbing on your ass or something stupid, which is going to take longer. So it was brilliant. And I could just focus on how I felt on each moment. So if I was not feeling particularly brilliant, yeah, I'll slow down, I'll problem solve what's going on. When I felt better, I'd pick it up. So I never felt as if I was chasing myself or had to get somewhere to meet someone. And yeah, it was really liberating. I would highly recommend running with no crew and no pacers. It was fantastic.
Let's see how we can make this as challenging as possible. That is really tough. No crew and no pacers.
No crew, no pacers. I never felt alone. Our community is such that I felt supported. So in some of the aid stations, I'd bump into other people's crew, and I know them. They're other runners. And towards the end of the race, they'd be going, so how you doing? Do you need anything? Can I get you anything? No, I'm absolutely fine, thank you. The volunteers were great. When I had problems with my bra straps digging in, I always take KT tape with me because it's amazing. It's like the duct tape of trail running world. Never actually used it for what it's supposed to be used for, but it's really handy to have. So just padded my shoulders to stop that happening, and a lady helped me with that. Another aid station, it was actually a runner's wife, sprayed me down with Radio Salil, which is the best muscle relaxant spray ever. So yes, I was alone. No, I didn't have a crew, but it's such a lovely, welcoming, open community that there were people there that were willing to help. And I wasn't afraid to ask for help when I needed it.
Man, yeah. That's just beautiful. I love it. I love the collaboration and just how much that plays, just how central of a role that plays in the racing out there. Yeah, and there's Coach Drew popping into the chat, just reiterating on that sense of community. And again, oh man, like I view myself as a community organizer with microCHAT, and I want so badly to have that in this kind of virtual community and eventually more of a real life community. And because there's nothing like feeling supported like that, right? Like think
Yeah,
about
and as you,
running that race if you didn't feel that way.
yeah, absolutely. And I had as you know, microcosm person on my side as virtual crew, which was Sarah Hancock, because she lives
Yeah.
in Canada, because I knew the second night could be rough. I'm all right with the first night. I love running at night, love a nighttime start, but the second night can get a bit hairy. So I had her on speed dial. So if I needed somebody to talk, just to speak English with me, I could ring her and I wasn't waking or anybody up in the middle of the night.
Oh man, I love that. Yeah. Heck yeah. And, thank you, Sarah, for stepping up and supporting like that. I think it's just so awesome to see you guys connecting in that way and to just see how positively that has impacted you in your racing, and particularly in, working through such a challenging goal. I mean, not only is this 100 miles, not only is it steep, difficult terrain, but no crew, no pacers. You've got 2 drop bags for 100 miles in the mountains. Again, it's crazy. I love how you mentioned process-oriented goals, Zena, because this is something that we talk about a ton. And I think there's some important insights in here. And I know when we chatted about this and have chatted a bunch of times about those process-oriented goals, something you do is the note card. Would you mind talking to the folks about the note card?
My flashcards.
Yeah.
So these are my flashcards. Every long race I do, I make a set of flashcards. It used to just be a strip of paper, but my eyesight's so bad now, I actually need to make flashcards that are a bit bigger. So they have on them, it's so I can break the race down, basically aid station to aid station. So just before I leave an aid station, I can see what's the next aid station, how far I've got to go, how much I'm climbing up, how much I'm climbing down, what the profile's like. But I've also got other notes on there. So on some of them where I know that the section is going to take me longer, it might be a note, don't forget to take your 3rd water bottle with you, for instance. But each one of them also has at times an affirmation on it, something to remind me to be doing. So at kilometer 130, there's a 9k descent that's technical and not very pleasant. And so I knew I was not going to be moving my best. So I wrote on that one, I move with ease and grace for 2 reasons. One, I can laugh at myself because I was not going to be moving with ease and grace, and I wasn't. And 2, I was still trying to remind myself to be smooth, still trying to remind myself to keep moving forwards, keep progressing towards that goal. Yeah, they work really, really well for me. And at the start line, we're running, the way we're organized is if you run trail, the chances are you belong to a running club. So there were 4 other guys from my club running the race, and we were all stood together in the corral at the start line. And I was looking at my first one, which was basically relax, just ignore what everybody's doing and do your own thing. And they were like, what are these? What have you got? And I was explaining what they were. And they were really, really interested in them. But the other thing they're great for is if your watch stops or goes skewy in the middle of a race, you can still work out where you are, what you're doing, and how far you've got to go. So they're a really good backup, which is a good job because my watch did go screwy in the middle of the race, which isn't the first time.
So awesome and such a good idea. And I think for 2 reasons. One, when you write things down, they stay in your mind for a lot longer. And so the process of writing down notes for each section and condensing them in a way that you can actually carry them and practically use them is a great way to like get into the back of your mind what the course is going to be like at each section. And then just having that visual reminder and a physical thing that you can take out, that's going to make it much more likely that you actually use it during the race. Rather, if it's just a mantra that you've got in your head, that can be a little harder to sometimes pull from. Rather, when you have a physical thing to look at, that's like kind of a constant reminder there. So
Yeah.
amazing tool, amazing tool.
They're my safety blanket. Don't run an ultra without them.
100%. All right, let's get into the race a little bit. How did the race unfold? Were there any differences in how you ran this compared to past races or past years at the event?
So I've run the 50 miler twice. The first time I ran the 50 miler, I was on my own. The second time, well, we say there's no paces. We mean there's no paces in the American sense. You can actually pace somebody. You just have to run the entire race from the start line with your bib number to the end. So the second time, I paced a friend of mine called Billy, who hadn't done this type of race before, was very nervous, and we did it together. So I've lost my train of thought. I'm really sorry.
Yeah, that's all good. I remember when you were supporting Billy.
Yeah, it was one of the first things we did. It was just before the pandemic. So obviously it's double the distance. One of the big things I'd practiced when I did Tres Herrera was ignoring what everybody else did. So when I started out, I was really concentrating on how I felt inside, because our start lines are not low key. They're essentially, they feel as if you're in the middle of a club, and then there might be some poem or a battle cry, and occasionally fireworks, violinists, or maybe a cannon or two. So if you wonder why Europeans go out like a bat out of hell, it's because they've been wound up by the speaker at start line. So and it's disconcerting when you're getting passed by so many people at the start, to relax and not chase and not get caught up in all of that. So wanted specifically to do my own thing, ignore what everybody else was doing, yes, chat because everybody's excited, but not try and keep up, just do what I wanted to do, start how I wanted to start, and really lay the foundation for how I hoped the race would go, continue, throughout the day and night and the next day.
So mindful. I love that approach. And how did that, setting yourself up like that, how do you feel that worked out for you over the course of the whole race?
I ran with joy. I ran with gratitude. I was smiling the entire time. I think I sent you the video clip of me coming out of Ronda. I've got the biggest smile on my face, and everybody else around me looks downtrodden. I was just so happy to be there and to have the opportunity to run the race, and that feeling, that sentiment never ever left me, and it was a great way to keep going forwards and carry me onwards. So I think I was talking to Sarah yesterday, because she was like, well, so how did it go? And I was explaining, she was like, oh, so it was a joy with a smattering of sufferance. And I thought, yeah, that's about sums up the race.
Yeah, and when things got tough, how did you respond to the adversity?
So something I always do in training is, if things aren't quite right, I sort it there and then. I never wait till I get back to the car, or wait till I find a spot or a water point. If something's not right, you try and settle it there and then. And I actually had a big problem with my shoes, 20k out from Ronda and 40k away from my second drop bag. And you just sort it, and there's no point in getting upset about it. There's no point getting frustrated. You just need to work out what you're going to do. And of course, stomach goes slightly south. That's not unusual. But instead of getting frustrated and annoyed and angry, you just go, okay, accept it. Let's work out what the problem is. Slow it down. Continue on. And it was just these. And they felt like little bumps rather than another mountain to climb over, because I never let it get to me.
So much wisdom in that. When you, like accept the challenge and then problem solve it rather than saying things shouldn't feel this way. It makes what could be a mountain into a little molehill or a bump,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it just felt like little bumps. I mean, was it tough? Well, of course it was tough. It's a mountain 100 miler, but I was living in the moment all the time. So it just, when these problems occurred, they were just, yeah, little waves, little bumps that kept carrying me forwards.
And they kept carrying you forwards. I really like that too. Just like a wave, it is moving, forwards. That's awesome. Yes. I think it's so important to have that overall sense of imagery when you are dealing with the challenge, especially in a long race like this. You have to keep moving forward, right? Like the challenge, I think we often think of as like a block. It's a roadblock. Challenge, can't go forward. Challenge, can't go forward. But when you use the challenge and you use it as a way to stay in the moment and you accept it, it carries you forward. I mean, there's so much wisdom in that. And we have so many aspiring 100 milers on this team and ultra runners. And there's just, and this, it's real in any distance. I mean, there's the same thing you go through in 100 is the same thing someone who's running their first 10K is going to feel at certain moments of that race. And like, we all have these things in common, no matter what the distance is, because running is tough, especially when we're doing something for the first time. And so I think just having that illustration, I love it. The wave is it that the wave can represent a challenge, but it also represents carrying you forward. Nice. There's so much wisdom in that. Was there any one particular moment where you felt like you really had to rise up to a big challenge? Like, where was the crux for you in the race?
Well, I hate to disappoint you, but there really wasn't a major crux. The worst moment was coming into the second to last aid station. And I tell you, the chair was very inviting. And I knew if I sat down, I'd struggle to get up quickly enough. I'd done a lot of thought and visualizing how I was going to move through aid stations, and I hadn't, yeah, and I knew I didn't want to hang around, and that was tough because it was about 2 a.m. in the morning on the second night, so goodness knows how many hours I'd been up, and there were a lot of other runners sat, and it's in a school, and it's a primary school with the small chairs and desks, and they're all sat down on these tiny chairs with their heads on the desks. So I got out of there as quickly as I could because I thought that was honestly the worst moment, but which is minor, really, really minor.
Awesome. Yeah, like that feels minor now, and you talk about these things so pragmatically, which I think is an important part of your individual approach to this, Zena. But the chair can just be the death of us in long races, and way to have awareness and visualize that ahead of time, and then know how to respond when that was going to come up, because that could have been a major challenge. Like, I just can't get up. And like we all know, when you're deep into a long race and you sit down, you get stiff really fast. And then when you're stiff, it's really hard to get up and keep moving. So avoiding the chair.
The other thing is you can get really cold really fast.
Right. Yeah.
And I was aware of that because, if you've got crew, they might throw a jacket over you. If you're on your own, yes, you might put a thin corta viento, a windbreaker over the top, but it's not going to do much. So actually, you're better to keep moving than to sit down, however much you fancy that chair.
Awesome. So what did it mean for you to finish this race, get your first 100-miler under your belt? How did you celebrate it?
Second. So when I got into Villaluenga, which was kilometer 120, I knew when I hit there that had finished come hell or high water. So all the emotions hit then. And I was coming down the hill in tears because it's like, I've made it. I can't believe I've made it here. And I was dirty crying, I'll be honest. And out of some rocks jumps my friend Billy, who I mentioned earlier, and his wife. I didn't know that they'd come and to spectate at the race, and they'd come specifically to see me run and cheer me on, which made the crying even worse. And then I got into the aid station, and my husband was running the 50 mile. He'd start at 10 a.m. the next day, and he was stood there in front of me. You couldn't have timed it better. And so I was able to get out all that, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't believe how well this is going. I can't believe that this is going to happen. It was incredible. When I finished the race, as I said, my watch had gone screwy. And maths is not a strong point of mine when I've been up for, well, longer than 32 hours because it was a nighttime start. And I'm going, it's 2 a.m. We started at 6 p.m. That's 32. That can't be right. Carried on doing this for about an hour till I came in. And I was just shocked. I couldn't believe that I'd finished feeling that good with a smile on my face the entire way. It was nuts. But it was 3 a.m. So there wasn't a big celebration or time to think. It was literally get some food down and straight to sleep. But I think it really hit after the recovery period, because there were two questions here. Is 100 miles too far? What's the recovery? What's the cost going to be? And it was only after I'd recovered properly, and I was like, actually, yeah, I can do this. This is not something I can't do anymore, or perhaps the cost is too high to want to do. And that was, that was it.
I mean, it's pretty amazing to think we're about 90 days, 91 days from when that race took place. So roughly 3 months ago, and you're back to training. I mean, recovery has gone really well. In fact, you've done another race since then, and you're thinking about another race coming up here in July, and then building towards another really long 130-kilometer race with a lot of elevation gain at Hanal. And to me, I'm like, okay, like looking at like my remarks in the training log after you finished the race, and I'm thinking again, like, okay, we really nailed it, because it was lower volume, less performance pressure. And like all of that came together with the preparation that you had with your flashcards and preparing, like you put a lot of thought into those 2 drop bags, all of this stuff. And then just holding yourself to those process-oriented goals and taking it moment to moment. You had an amazing race, 6 hours faster than kind of what you thought you were going to be able to do. And then you recovered really well, which is like just the icing on the cake after all of that. And something really, maybe there's a celebration in that, like you said, just feeling healthy and being able to continue to do what you love to do without all of that extra downtime like we've had in the past.
I think what it's also done for me is open doors to possibilities of what I might think of doing next, as in different. I mean, if it's gone the other way, that was also fine. And when I started the race, I was really at peace with if it was too much and the recovery was not what I was willing to spend, because if you're recovering, you can't do what you love. That was fine. So it's the fact that it's opened these doors to new possibilities of what I can look at doing in the future.
100%. And taking it full circle to go give Hanal another crack. And I think like you're coming at that as a much more experienced ultra runner, with some really positive experiences under your belt. And that's, I mean, I'm just going to go ahead and say it, you know, not to jinx anything, but I think you've never been in a better position to dive into another really difficult 100-miler.
Well, it's not quite 100 miles, but I let you off with the climb because it's unrelenting.
I mean, it's up there. My kilometers to miles is bad, but 80 miles ish. I mean, it still might as well be 100 when you're adding in 6,500 meters of climbing. What is that? I'm going to look it up. 21,000 feet of climbing. I mean, that's just insane.
That one just goes, and it's a down up race, that one. So you go down from a village to a river, and then you go up to the next village, and you do this literally 13 times. It's unrelenting, but the area is amazing, and the villages and the people there are incredible. So I've trained for this race for a number of times. I've got a lot of history with this race. But you'll be doing a training run, and there will be a guy with a donkey with crops in the baskets, like you see in pictures. And they'll go, "Oh, do you know we have a race around here?" And you go, yeah, I'm training for it. They're like, "Oh, amazing. Which one are you doing?" So these retired people in these tiny villages are very into ultra runners. It's incredible.
I love that. It's so representative of the community that you guys have out there. Yeah, I'm so excited for you. Okay, last question. Looking back at the accomplishment and everything that you went through in that journey, and looking at the goals that you have ahead in the next 4 months or so, you know, how are you going to use that experience to help propel you forward towards your new goals? Is there anything in particular that you're like holding on to in a healthy way and you're using to help move you forward and set you up for success?
Well, let's just say low volume, please. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think each time you do a longer race, you grow in a different way, and you learn something more. So it's always, there's not like one overwhelming, "Oh my God, I did this so different." This is races, an accumulation of years of tricky, difficult, steep, long races. So you learn some more. I think definitely I am going to throw out all process orientated goals with now, which is going to be really, really hard, because I've always wanted to go under 24 hours on that. And I think for that to actually happen, I think I need to throw it out the window and forget about it almost, because I seem to run best if I don't give myself that pressure. So just go out, run with joy, run with gratitude, be thankful of all, for the volunteers, for the race organizers, for designing the races, and for making it possible to even do them, because you can't do these things on your own at all. It needs somebody's vision, and then to be able to create these for us. So yeah, I think that's what I want to do most, is just forget about times and just run completely from feel.
I love it. And you've become so intuitive and really good at responding to what you feel. And you really highlighted this a couple questions ago when you mentioned, you know, run a little bit more, push a little bit more when I feel good, know when I'm not feeling that good, and then to just relax and, you know, lean into a process-oriented goal or pick up a flashcard. And that like intuitive nature is so important to running these long races. When you go out and you've got a huge performance goal in your head and that's all you think about, it becomes a lot more difficult to deal with the inherent challenges and the ups and downs that occur out there. And your approach, which I'm going to like, again, double down on, where you're staying in the moment, you're more accepting of the challenges and the inherent nature of those challenges in the race, and you're not building them up to be more than they are. You're dealing with them one at a time, very pragmatically. How can I address this and then keep this process moving forward? I mean, that approach in and of itself keeps you in the present moment. It keeps you thinking about process rather than performance. And clearly that worked so well for you, because it's not just, okay, what is the training approach that's going to get us to the start of this big mountain race feeling ready to go? It's also, okay, how do we then take that training and then translate it into the experience that you want to have? I really like the idea of acceptance, moving forward, all of those things, the gratitude, and remembering that the race doesn't happen if it wasn't for a race director's vision or multiple people's vision on the course, and the volunteers and the community behind that. And it's so big, right? Like, it's so much bigger than just you out there running. And so remembering that is, at least for me, and it sounds like for you too, Zena, is like a really important part of the process and can coax out some more of your potential, which is super cool.
Yeah, it is. I say, I'm so lucky with where I live. I'm so lucky. I didn't even know any of this existed when I first moved here. It's been the biggest gift has been Paco, who was the trainer for the kids' athletics, saying, come on, parents, why don't you train with the kids? If you told me then what would have happened now, I would have believed them. I'd have thought you were off your rocker, quite honest.
It's awesome. Well, thanks so much, Zena. I really enjoyed chatting with you, and it's just so fun to go in just in a little more depth even than, I mean, we've talked so much about this race, but it's fun to just do it all in 1 hour-long session and then to involve the rest of the community in this. I know for me as a coach, it was a really special moment when you finished that race, and I still feel the stoke and the fire within myself, just going through these details and rehashing everything that you went through to get that finish. And just what that means for you in the overall scope of your running journey and everything. It's so exciting to see where you're going with all of this. And yeah, we got a big 4 months ahead of us to get ready for another challenging mountain adventure. And I think this is going to be super fun.
Me too. Thanks, TJ.
You're welcome. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining in. Zena, I'll see you in the logs. And everybody else, have a great weekend.